This program is part of American Graduate. Let's make it happen, a public media initiative made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Hello and welcome to American Graduate, Teachers Making a Difference. I'm Ray Suarez of the PBS NewsHour. On average, a child will spend 7 hours a day in the classroom, but what they learn will last them a lifetime. A teacher's method of connecting to students is an invaluable part of the craft. Joining me for today's discussion is Pedro Martinez, Deputy Superintendent of the Clark County School District. Dave Wilson, Principal of Chaparral High School. Dr. Linda Archambault, Principal of Gibson Middle School. Keith Cloker teaches science at Las Vegas High School. And John Strott teaches science at Roy Martin Middle School. Pedro Martinez, you've begun the process of instituting the Common Core standards. What are they for? There must have been curriculum standards before, targets of what kids had to know by the end of particular years in school. How is this different, and how does it change things?
Sure. So, Ray, it's a large national movement where we're having common learning objectives for all of our children. So, as you said, prior to this, we did have standards. The problem was that all 50 states and the District of Columbia had their own set of standards, their own set of assessments. Now, we're talking about common objectives across the country. 47 of the 50 states have adopted it. The other important aspect is that it's also much more rigorous. To give you an example, in the new Common Core standards, we have geometry concepts that were introduced in 5th grade that are now being introduced in kindergarten. Of course, they look different than they did in 5th grade, but the fact that we're pushing rigor all the way from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. The high school standards are all driven by College Board. In other words, what are colleges expecting for children when they come out of high school so that they're college and career ready?
So a 4th grader in Nevada is roughly learning the same things as a 4th grader in Florida and Massachusetts? Absolutely, Ray. And we know that across the different states, prior to the Common Core standards, every state had a different level of rigor. But meanwhile, when our children graduate from high school, if they're applying to colleges across the country, they have to compete with each other. And so my child who lives here in Nevada, native Nevadan, has to compete with somebody who is graduating from Massachusetts or a high school in Virginia or a high school in Maryland. Now we have common learning objectives so that all of our children are prepared. So if they want to go to any college in the country, they'll be better prepared. Well, at ground zero, the end users of these new standards are the teachers and students. How has it changed your life, or has it?
Well, it will change my life eventually when it gets implemented. However, right now it is an issue of rigor, and I think that any teacher that is truly teaching for success of their students has to implement a high level of rigor, and the core standards will bring that. And I'm also very excited to see the standards of Nevada with the standards of states like Massachusetts, high performing states, and so there's a level of comparability between myself, what I'm teaching in my classroom, and what is happening elsewhere in America. So personally, I'm quite excited for the change, just to see, how things are spread state to state here, here in America.
John, you already know middle school science, so it can't be that big a change, or is it? They'll hand you the new curriculum, say, teach this, and you will, right?
Well, currently with the Common Core standards, there aren't science standards yet, but they do have literacy and writing standards for science. So the biggest impact it's had on me is it's provided me with very clear guidance in how to rigorously incorporate reading and writing into my science classroom. So it hasn't said like, oh no, this is the science they need to know, but it has given me like, this is how you can incorporate these really strong nonfiction literacy skills that they need into my science instruction.
Dr. Archambault, I've been interviewing people about education for 35 years, and one of the religiously held ideas is of localism. I don't want people in Washington telling me how to do my job here in Southern Nevada. I don't want the same standards as kids in Illinois because we take care of our schools here. Does it mean also a cultural change among educators, among families, that no, we're actually going to try to be one American approach toward getting kids up to stuff?
It's a mindset change for many. The Common Core standards will take those skills that everyone absolutely needs to know and will allow the teachers to focus on those skills. And in the end, we'll be able to compare apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. My teachers are excited to have the math and the English and reading in place right now. And one of the features of the Common Core is infusing technology into education, which in the past many states hadn't done. So we're looking at our parents knowing that we're upping the bar, that we're raising standards, that we are requiring more of our students, higher levels of critical thinking. All of that is in the Common Core. So it's really important that everybody understand that it's best for our students.
Dave Wilson, you've already got a lot on your plate to begin with, right? You're trying to turn around a school that's had its troubles. Is this a help or just another thing to worry about?
It's actually a help. Next year we begin the incorporation in English of the Common Core. It's a better flow. It looks at anthologies. The types of literature that students are going to be exposed to is more apropos to what we're trying to accomplish. I'm excited, and if you look at the correlation to our other subject areas, it's neat. And one of the huge things is that it makes the assumption that students, when they get to high school, are already reading, and that's a necessity.
Is that a change? I mean, weren't we already assuming that they were reading?
We're already making that assumption, but you know, the reality is that we just gave the high school proficiency examination at my high school. I have 569 juniors. Of those, 269 had not passed that proficiency in reading yet. They've had 2 opportunities. This would be their 3rd opportunity. We gave 2 different correlations to look at where they were reading and where the potholes were. Of those 269 students, I had 1 student reading at grade level. So to assume that students are reading at grade level by the time that they're a junior in high school is an improper assumption.
But when they're a junior in high school, do you have time? I mean, the finish line is looming up there ahead. Do you have time to get them to a 12th grade standard by the time they want to walk out of that place with a diploma?
Absolutely, positively. But in order to do that, you have to jettison, you know, a lot of things that students would normally be exposed to. You have to focus in on what specific potholes they have, filling those potholes, and having quality teachers like these gentlemen that truly know how to teach the kids, how to motivate them, how to impart their knowledge, and how to assess so they know specifically what they need to teach.
Pedro, I'm sure it's more complicated than just sending out the paperwork. Here's the curriculum, go. What do you have to do with teacher development, teacher training, to get everybody ready to go system-wide with this?
Well, you know, what's great, Ray, with the Common Core standards, it helps us align all of our support systems. So one of the challenges when you have different sets of standards across different states, you don't have as many tools. Everybody has to invent their own tools because the standards are different across the country. Now what we're doing is we're aligning all of our systems. So this summer, for example, we're going to be training 1,300 teachers in just kindergarten through 3rd grade with the new literacy standards. All 4th and 5th grade teachers will be trained on the math and the new math standards. All of our middle school teachers will be trained, all of our core subject middle school teachers will be trained in English and math, and as John was just saying, also around how to use strategies within science and social studies around literacy and around math. Same thing at the high school. As Dave said, we're rolling out the English standards in 9th grade, but we're also training all of the algebra and geometry teachers on the new standards, as well as all of our science and social studies teachers around, again, how do you integrate these different subjects. One of the also benefits of the Common Core, in the past, it used to be that English was its own department and we would just teach English. Math was its own department, they would teach math. science and social studies, and I know our teachers know there's different dynamics within those departments. Well, now the Common Core forces us to look at everything and to say, you know, how do we make sure that we're integrating these subjects? Because frankly, in the past, we left it up to our students. Our students had to figure that out. Now, we're working together to say, how do we make sure that science is connected to math, hence engineering, hence STEM academies? How do we make sure that English and social studies are connected? Because whenever you're reading a passage, you have to also understand what's going on in that time. When the author was writing that passage, what was happening in history? And so that relevance is coming together. And so, again, I applaud our teachers. And I'm always amazed when a teacher comes out and says, you know, I want to really help our 12th graders graduate. So to your earlier question, Ray, about making sure that our children are ready even when they have 1 year left or 2 years left, we have amazing teachers that say, you know, we understand the strategies that we need to help these children. And so, you know, like I said, I just applaud that. And of course, John in the middle school level has the toughest job of all, because we know that if the children are not prepared at the middle school level, and Linda knows this, frankly, when they get to the high school, Dave has to be playing catch up. So it has to be a team effort, and the Common Core forces us to do that.
Well, let's talk to the principals about remediation. After a while, once this soaks in and it's system-wide, in theory, you should be doing less remediation because the kids who arrive in middle school, Dr. Archambault, are ready to be there.
Absolutely, and I have to be honest with you, my feeder elementary schools have done a phenomenal job. And we have more students every year coming better prepared, reading at higher levels, more proficient in math than ever before. But we still have those students that we've identified that have those holes in their education, and they need to be filled so that they can move forward. And so I think you're always going to have a certain number of kids that need that extra help, but it is something that we deal with on a regular basis, and we will continue to do so.
And in high school, it's pretty critical.
That's very critical. Last night, Pedro and I met with a group of businessmen, and we asked them to identify their number one need of graduates coming out of high school that were going to be coming in to be their employees. That's right. Let alone their consumers, but their employees. And they identified literacy. You know, the fact that they needed employees who could speak, they needed employees that could write, and they needed employees that could read for understanding. And utopia is that everybody's going to be reading at grade level when they hit high school. And with the Common Core, we're going to see more and more of that. So you are correct, there will be less remediation. But we always need to look at those potholes. We need to have specific information so that we can fill those potholes and every student can graduate and be successful.
Teachers, does this mean that you're going to spend more time talking to teachers in other disciplines just as an almost necessary part of the job?
I hope that it's not more time. I hope that, I hope that we're talking to other teachers in other disciplines as a necessary part of the job now. I hope that, really, that's what we should be doing. As Pedro put it before, you can do little things in science without a math or with English background. It's difficult to teach these things without this interdisciplinary, discussion amongst teachers. So with that said, I hope that it brings about the change if it's not already happening, but it should already be happening, Common Core standards or not.
If the purpose of schooling is to provide students with education that they can go out and use in the real world, they're not going to go out in the real world and be like, oh, here's a science experience, here's a math experience.
That's right.
It's going to come at them all at once. So we absolutely need to be working together as much as we can to provide them an experience that is as much like their real world experience.
I was prepping for this meeting with you all and reading my notes on the plane and came across the requirements for high school graduation, and since I'm here with you, I can bother you about this. Sure. There's no foreign language requirement to graduate from Las Vegas high schools, and the same day as I landed, I was walking along in the tourist area and heard people speaking 5 different languages, and I thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to have a lot of your high school graduates be able to help them if they have a problem? Tell them how to get from place to place, work out a challenge with their bill, any number of things. It's unusual now, looking across high schools across the country, not to have a foreign language requirement. Why is there still not one?
So Ray, again, that goes back to not having common standards across the country. every state would define their own definition, not only around whether you require language or not, but even the number of years of math, the number of years of science, the number of years of social studies. And so, for us, we have to look at how do we make sure that when students are coming out of high school, they are better prepared. Language is a great example. We've had students, so our high schools, by the way, are great in terms of promoting language. So all of our high schools do have language programs, even though it's not required. But one of the things that, because of the disconnect with our state standards, we have students right now that will take, for example, 2 or 3 years of French or Spanish or a different language. Well, sometimes they need one more year so that they can, when they go to college, they don't have to take those language classes in college. Well, a lot of times, because again, our standards are not aligned, our children don't find out till they get to college. Now, in some of our best high schools, our counselors will say, look, Dave, you got one more year, take it, because when you go to college, you won't have to take that class. But again, these are the alignment issues that we're dealing with. And like I said, now we're having those discussions both with the state, we're having discussions within our schools. But again, this is the work that has to be done.
Well, when this new world teachers is fully implemented and K to 12, everybody's cross-trained, everybody's ready to go, there's still the craft of standing in a classroom and getting however many, 25 or 30 minds in sync, on task, and you're all marching to the same place. Give us some tricks of the trade for student engagement. In any class, there's going to be some kids who are right there with you on the rivet and some kids who are staring out the window. How do you get them all engaged?
Well, it starts to know what it's good to start at what they enjoy doing, and staying up to date to an extent with pop culture and everything like that. I'm terrible at it, and I'm barely older than most of my kids, but really. Well,
maybe that's the charm. Then. You're totally square.
One thing that really works in my classroom is an idea of any sort of competition amongst my kids or my classes. They just really stand up for that. But I will say that the one fundamental thing that works in my classroom is just this idea, it's just showing kids how much you care about them. And a kid is willing to work for you if you show them that you care about them. And I do it whether it be directly or indirectly every day, but just showing them how much they mean to you is really what it takes to get beyond just that I'm a teacher and you're a student relationship, and forming that relationship is what's key to educating students.
How do you keep track of 150 different kids with all their own strengths and weaknesses, things they're getting, things they're not getting, things they're excelling at, things that they're totally missing? I am in awe of teachers who do it well. Any advice?
I have a very well set up Excel workbook of every student, every lesson we do, how they performed on that lesson, color-coded, proficient, not, who needs help. Keeping track for me of exactly where each student is and doing my best to stay on top of that is essential. And even more so, I've really found this year, is making sure the students are keeping track of that. Mm-hmm. Like, keeping track of 150 students is difficult for me. But if I had 150 students that came in and knew exactly where they were and knew exactly where they needed to be, that makes my job so much easier and makes their experience so much more meaningful. So every day when my students do a quiz, they have a tracker that they keep track of. On this subject, I got this score, and if I don't like that score, I'm going to go sign up to get some tutoring and redo it.
If a teacher has a breakthrough from doing it in the classroom, realizing that there's an approach to a certain part of the curriculum, a technique for student engagement that really works, do you, principals, find out about it? Is it possible to scale it up and make sure other teachers know about it?
Absolutely. My teachers meet on Wednesdays for professional learning communities, and we do after school, after hour STPT, which is structured teacher planning time. They share and collaborate not only best practices, but they also talk about students who are doing well, who are not. What works for classroom management for one might not work for another. I might have a child that's struggling in my class, but you're having him be successful. It might be something as simple as moving him closer to me in the classroom that's going to make a difference. So the collaboration piece is huge, and the professional development is what it's really all about, in making our teachers stronger and more confident in what they're doing. So we do that a lot. I mean, that's the biggest change on my campus.
No longer do teachers just teach in isolation. It used to be that you walked into your classroom, you closed your door, and that was the end of it. We also use a professional learning community time. Our students at Chaparral get out early on Thursdays. We have extended days during the rest of the days, allowing teachers to sit down and collaborate. What was unique is my opportunity to hire teachers. One of the key factors that I was looking at, the key factor, by the way, was truly caring about kids. But one of the key factors was the ability to collaborate, the ability to share, the ability to plan together, assess together, to look at the data together and work together as a team. There aren't any magic bullets. I mean, if the magic bullet had been found, it would have been replicated and we wouldn't be having this discussion.
That's right.
But there are a whole lot of
very challenging project of turning around a troubled school. You and others, I'm sure you had collaborators, had to figure out which teachers to keep, which ones to lose, which ones were savable, for want of a better word, who could be brought up to standard, and which ones weren't going to get you where you felt you needed to go. That must have been a terrifying process.
You know, it was terrifying. It was mind-numbing, the speed at which you had to do things and looking at those key indicators. And you know, the person that was probably most affected by it was the one assistant principal that I kept at the building. Because when I said, how do you want to notify the teachers that we're retaining and those that we're not retaining? He said, I want to do it. And you know, he was recounting to me yesterday, you know, that once again, that experience, going out and having a cousin in a classroom that you see at all of your family gatherings and telling them, I love you, but you're not good enough to stay at Chaparral. Those discussions had to happen, but you had to have those key indicators that you're looking for. And I said, number one, first and foremost, is the ability to really care about, really connect with, and understand that you need to make a difference with kids' lives. And you know, that's why I applaud these teachers and other teachers like them. You know, that's the magic. You know, as an administrator, I have a limited role. You know, I can build the structure, I can provide the supports. But once that class starts and those kids are with that teacher is the one individual and the only individual who makes a difference in their lives.
If parents with options are looking for the exit door, are you at a point yet here at CCSD where you can make the case, make the elevator pitch to hang in there, stay with this system for the long haul? And you know, this has happened in school systems all over the country. You were in Chicago before this. People who have mobility often use it because they feel very little faith in the long-term viability of the system. Can you today convince them to stay?
You know, Ray, I think I can make a strong case, Ray. And what I'm finding more and more, as well as our superintendent is finding, as we talk to the community and we reach out, they want to be part of the solution. You know, as much as, we always want to promote choice. We have great magnet programs, for example. We have, for example, at one of our high schools, at Rancho High School, we have an aviation program that's just amazing. Kids can actually get a pilot's license by the time they graduate high school. So we have amazing programs that we want to replicate. But when I talk to families, they say, you know, Pedro, I want to stay at my neighborhood school. You know, I love your magnet programs, but let's make our neighborhood school the best school that it can be. And I think that's always the work. And frankly, you know, the key is always, and we've talked about it, it's our teachers. You know, when we have teachers that are working together, collaborating, because as Dave said, there is no magic bullet. It really isn't. It's really about teachers problem solving. You know, I always look at, when I look at education, I always make analogies to the medical industry. In the medical industry, even though it's not perfect, they're always trying to solve the problem, whether it's the cure for cancer or other diseases. And it's an ongoing process. It never stops. For us in K-12 education, it's the same issue. We have children that live in high poverty. They don't have the vocabulary that other children may have. My son, Lucas, will have a very different life than I did when my parents had a second grade education. I was an English language learner. So his life is going to be very different than mine. But these are issues that we have to work together. And again, it starts with our teachers, it starts with our great leaders, and then problem solving. But it really is, again, how do we help children that are coming with different strengths, and how do we get them to the same place?
Thanks to all my guests for joining me and sharing their thoughts and experiences. If you'd like more information, including tips and resources on how to help your own child, please visit our website at vegaspbs.org/American Graduate. And thanks for joining us.
This program is part of American Graduate. Let's make it happen. A public media initiative made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.